Well, time is running out to reach an agreement on climate change at the UN Climate Conference, known as the COP30. In the summit's final hours, Colombia and the Netherlands are pushing for a phase-out of fossil fuels. The heated negotiations come after a new draft proposal presented by Summit President Brazil did not include any mention of fossil fuels. Brazil had supported a phase-out, but it was removed from the text under pressure from a group of mainly oil-producing countries. The phase-out was a key demand by some of the countries most affected by climate change. Germany's Environment Minister Carsten Schneider said the draft proposal needs to go further.
We're here in Brazil, holding a climate protection summit at the gateway to the rainforest, aiming to bring down global greenhouse gas emissions. And we support the Brazilian government's proposal to phase out fossil fuels. But the draft text that was published following initial consultations is inadequate to halt and reverse global warming. That's why we in the European Union jointly believe that we need more climate protection measures, clearer regulations for phasing out fossil fuels and, above all, that the COP summit here in Berlin must send a signal that protecting the rainforest is central to all this, because the Amazon is the lungs of our planet. That is what's missing from the text, and we will work on it day and night.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Jennifer Morgan. She's a climate diplomat taking part in the conference in Brazil. She is a former special climate envoy of the German Federal Foreign Office. Ms. Morgan, it's good to have you with us. The latest draft of the summit agreement does not mention a phase-out of fossil fuels or even have the word roadmap. Is meaningful climate action, is it even possible without this measure?
I think the key issues that are at play here are, number one, really about how countries can scale up their climate action so that greater temperature rise can be avoided and the 1.5 degree goal can be kept. And one of the measures there is to create a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. That's gotten a lot of support here moving forward. Another is around a roadmap around deforestation. And of course, the question of finance. All of those things have to come together. And really, it's about how countries can move forward on a multilateral solution that accelerates action in the fossil fuel area, but also to reduce down to zero deforestation.
And Ms. Morgan, isn't that the problem, though, that these points are not coming together? You can't even get the word roadmap in the final draft.
Well, that's what negotiators are working on right now. So there's groups of countries coming together. The European Union is working with small islands, is working with Latin Americans to bring together a coalition that can bring those different words or something like them into the text. It's not about one word like roadmap. It's more about showing that more action is happening. We have to remember President Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris Agreement. The geopolitics are rough, but they're working hard here to come together to have something ambitious to move forward.
Which countries have been blocking more decisive climate action?
I think the group that has expressed the most concerns is the Arab group. And also, you know, it's been a year where both also the group that has Saudi Arabia, China, India in it, they're more comfortable with something less ambitious. I would hope that in the final hours, a country like China could rise to the occasion and help deliver a more ambitious outcome here than what was presented this morning by the Brazilian presidency.
If you talk to people around the world, they will tell you that they are worried about the economy, they're worried about war. Is there room in our collective consciousness to be concerned about climate change right now?
Well, I have two thoughts on that. Actually, almost all the polls show that people are concerned about climate change. It might not be the first thing, but they are still very concerned about it. And if you care about economics, if you care about security, then you need to move forward on tackling climate change, because the economy that is being built the renewable energy economy that brings jobs, that creates energy security, and the stability to avoid conflicts because of the impacts that are hitting so hard. Those are the issues that underpin the need to act more fundamentally and strongly on climate change.
I want to ask you about Germany. How has the delegation been able to present itself overall? I mean, what does it tell us about Germany's willingness to seriously tackle climate change?
The delegation here has been working very hard to also create a positive outcome within the European Union, of course, working with many other countries. I think that they're doing their best here on the international level to move things forward.
What about deforestation? Are there any signs that the world's rainforests, such as the Amazon, are they going to be safer after this conference?
Well, this has been a big priority. Obviously, we are in a rainforest in the Amazon right now. What you've seen is a number of different initiatives led by Brazil, new funding mechanisms like their Tropical Forest Forever facility, which now has $6.5 billion in it, that would give incentives for people not to cut down the forest and rather to use it sustainably. We've seen initiatives here with funding on marking indigenous lands. That is so important because indigenous peoples very strong here, and we know what good protectors they are of the rainforest. So I think it has been a good COP for forests, but also looking for a potential roadmap on ending deforestation by 2030 still.
I know that you have pointed out that indigenous people and local activists finally have a place at the negotiating table there in Brazil. Do you regard this as a significant win for COP30?
It is a very significant win. I think this is an inclusive COP. You have indigenous peoples. You've had the marches outside. For 3 straight years, there were no marches, no empowering of civil society. And for indigenous peoples to be so strong here, there's a People's Summit that has them there. The presidency has taken them seriously. And the process and the implementation will be stronger because the people are coming from the outside in. And I can tell you, they're loud here in the hallways, holding governments accountable.
Yeah, we can certainly hear that it's a lively place there, yeah. Senior climate diplomat Jennifer Morgan. Ms. Morgan, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I know it's a busy time there in Brazil. Thank you.
DW's Giulia Saudelli is in Belém covering the summit for us. Giulia, a roadmap to move away from fossil fuels was much discussed in recent days, but it's not in the latest draft for the final communique. Why is it missing, and what are the implications of that?
Yes, so this has been pretty much the hot topic in the last few days here in Belém at the COP conference. A group of over 80 countries have come together to sign a declaration pushing for the final text decision here at the COP to include a reference to a roadmap to move away from fossil fuels. Now, why is that important? Countries have already committed themselves here in previous COPs to transitioning away from fossil fuels, but there is no clear path ahead. We don't have a timeline. We don't have any stringent targets that would actually commit countries to deliver, would keep them in check and hold them responsible for not achieving the goals that they have set for themselves. And because the burning of fossil fuels, so coal, oil, and gas, is possibly the biggest contributor to global warming, this is extremely important for countries, not all of them in this case, but a significant group of countries, to say we really need to have a clear plan on how to reach ultimately the end of using fossil fuels. Now, with the fact that there is basically no mention of fossil fuels at all in the recent draft text, this is something that is unacceptable to many countries here, and they say they're going to fight tooth and nail in the negotiations to try to get it back in.
So which countries have been opposing inclusion of that passage then, Giulia? Who have the biggest blockers been this year in terms of agreeing on climate action?
Well, I'm sorry to say, but it is as it always is in a lot of these negotiations, the big oil producing countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, also Iran, potentially Russia. These are all countries that are known for being blockers of any kind of progress on wanting to phase out fossil fuels. We saw 2 years ago at the COP in Dubai, the final outcome actually surprised a lot of observers because despite the COP taking place in a big oil producing country, for the first time, the transition away from fossil fuels was included in a text, and it seemed like maybe there had finally been momentum to bring these reluctant countries on board. But we've seen after that in Baku at the COP last year, and here again, that there is a very, very strong resistance on wanting to commit to further ambition on fossil fuels. But we also see some developing countries who are those who are the most affected from the consequences of climate change. They want to link supporting more ambition on reducing emissions with funding coming from rich developed countries to support their green transition and their adaptation to the consequences of climate change. And this is also an issue that needs to be discussed, whether rich developed countries are willing to commit more financing to maybe make it possible to reach an agreement on fossil fuels.
And we should remind ourselves, of course, this conference taking place without the United States, which Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Giulia, thank you so much. Our correspondent, Giulia Saudelli, there in Belém, Brazil. And for more on this, we can speak now with Natalie Unterstell. She's the president of the Talanoa Institute. That's a think tank dedicated to climate change policies in Brazil. And she is in Belém. Natalie, in one word, how do you feel about COP30 on this last scheduled day of the conference?
Disappointment. I think we all came to the venue back from what happened yesterday with high expectations. This should be the last day of this COP. And unfortunately, what we got are several paragraphs in a very weak, watered-down text that will really not respond to the climate crisis and put us on track to more than 2 degrees warmer world. So disappointment is the sentiment in the corridors here today.
What will it mean, Natalie, if the final agreement does not include the phase out of fossil fuels? Will that be regarded as a major failure for this climate conference?
I believe so. I think we are past, the fact that we already mentioned that, and moreover, it's not about just having the words in the agreement, but really like setting a direction. We need clarity on, when we are starting this, when we are concluding this, who is going first, who is going to have some time, and basically the finance also for this. So in the absence of a target, a timeline, and finance, I think we will declare this, we will call it out as a complete failure.
So what's been preventing the agreement of phasing out fossil fuels? Is it the fossil fuel industry, the oil and gas industries, the oil producing countries?
Well, we have a mix. We have a block of countries here which are pushing for a deal on and establishing this roadmap for the transition away from fossil fuels. There are more than 82 at the moment. They've been very vocal, and they do have the support of civil society, subnational governments, etc. On the other hand, there are over 80 countries as well that are saying, no, we cannot do it right now. They're both producing countries, and then here producers of coal, of oil and gas, and that includes global south and global north countries. So we are going to see in the plenary today and in other negotiations more bilaterally done, how they're going to find a compromise, because they have to. We cannot step back. We cannot, retrocede in relation to what was agreed in Dubai. And at the same time, we would like to see them moving forward. But at the current moment, for the time being, I think the producing countries are really the ones pushing the no deal situation.
Now, your organization does focus on climate change policies in Brazil. What impact, if any, would passage of the draft agreement that's now on the table, what impact would that have on the world's rainforests, including the Amazon rainforest in Brazil?
Yeah. Well, you know, the Amazon rainforest is very, very close to a tipping point. This moment when it will turn into a savanna or a different ecosystem, this is already, it is already showing signals. We've been seeing last year, the year before, how dry the forest is becoming. And this is due to climate change. It's due to the climate impacts. So if we have a very weak, a watered down deal here in Belém, unfortunately, the forest will suffer more and more, especially if we go to a scenario of 2 degrees or more of global warming. Unfortunately, the forest will not be resilient to it. So it's really like the death. It's really like a very strong word what I'm using now, but it can become the death of the Amazon rainforest as we know it.
Talk to us about the draft financing proposal for climate adaptation, which of course is crucial for many countries that are very exposed. Is that financing element significant, and what sort of adaptation measures would be financed?
We are happy to see that there is this mention to adaptation finance because the situation is very difficult at the moment. The money for adaptation has been decreasing over the past 5 years, so it's good that this is there. But the way it's framed, it's not what it's needed because it calls for tripling of adaptation finance by 2030, but the details are lacking, and actually we would know, you know, what figures they are talking about just in 3 years from now. So there would be a lag, there are some inconsistencies around this. And there's also another point which is not clear who the payers would be. So basically you say you call for more money for adaptation, but you don't necessarily have the payers, the timeline, and a target. So we would like to see a better formulation coming out of Belém, and this is what I hear many developing nations at the moment are calling for.
Natalie, thank you very much. Thanks for talking with us. I was president of the Talanoa Institute, Natalie Unterstell, in Belém, Brazil.